Good morning and welcome with the Rise Up Orriant podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another iteration of our Orriant book club. This is now the fourth one that we've done this year. So excited for all of you that have either joined the book club and have already come to the table reading the book of the month, or you're just interested in hearing a little bit more about it so you can go out there and pick it up. So let me introduce our panelists today. There are three lovely faces that are joining us today. We have Jenny, whom many of you will recognize from all of our other book clubs. Chandra is back for another episode as well. So welcome back, Chandra. And Shell is also with us again. She's been with us before as well on the podcast. So three returning faces. So excited to have you all join us. And thanks for being here.
Thanks for letting us come back.
So we are discussing, I don't want to take any of the thunder away from this book because it packs such a punch. So Jenny, I want to hand it over to you to do a little intro of this book, and then we'll kind of dive in to, what the book is all about and the main points that we're taking out of it.
I'm going to actually kick the bucket to Shell because she does such a fabulous job. And she's like a huge James Clear fan who's the author of this book. So she'll actually take us off with just explaining a little bit about the book and a little bit about the author. And then we'll kind of transition from there, if that's okay.
Oh, got it. Sorry. I thought we were doing cycling first. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. We will get to cycling.
Talk about cycling.
So, James Clear wrote Atomic Habits. He is a well-respected and, in fact, internationally respected expert on habit formation, behavior change, and continuous improvement. He writes and speaks about these topics widely. He goes everywhere from startup companies to Fortune 500 companies and major league sports. Athletes incorporate the principles that he teaches. He became highly invested in habits after a very serious head injury his sophomore year of high school. Put him in a position where he really had very little else to go off of other than a mindset that he could work his way back up to achieve his full potential, and then really of necessity had to start very small. So imagine someone who has been an athlete their entire lives, having to go to physical therapy to practice basic motor patterns like walking in a straight line. He went from there to making the baseball team again the year after the accident, but being at the very bottom of the roster on the JV team as a junior. This only motivated him further to just keep working and to just trust in the process. Eventually, he was able to make the university team at Denison University. He was voted team captain as a junior, and as a senior, he was voted the most valuable male athlete at his university, on top of many other honors and accolades. So during the process of recovering from this injury and just really trying to rediscover his potential, he started to take notes about the experiments that he was doing with habits. And when he graduated from college, he put these principles to work that had worked so well for him in academics and in sports, to building his business. And in 2012, he launched jamesclear.com, where he started to release articles twice a week. He still releases articles once a week. And in fact, his monthly newsletter, his weekly newsletter, that is 321 Thursday, now has 3 million subscribers. So if you'd like to learn more about him and his story and subscribe for the newsletter, it's Wednesday. So if you do it today, you can get your first issue tomorrow.
I was to say, two of those 3 million people are you and I, Shell. I don't know
yes,
if
exactly.
subscribe, but I know you and I do.
Yes, I look so forward to it every week. So hopefully, as we discuss the principles today, you'll see why we're such big fans and why we're encouraging you to go and learn more about what he has to offer. The book is, in his words, meant to be a synthesis, and I'm actually going to just read this directly. It's meant to be a synthesis of the best ideas smart people figured out a long time ago, as well as the most compelling discoveries scientists have made recently. My contribution, I hope, is to find the ideas that matter most and connect them in a way that is highly actionable. the backbone of this book is what he calls his 4-step model of habits, which we will not talk about today. But what we're going to do is lay the groundwork for that 4-step model, as well as the 4 laws of behavior change that emulate or that flow from the model. That will be part 2 of this book club. Because what the principles that we're going to talk about today, we chose 4 big picture concepts that we feel like represent an essential mindset shift, that will really help us to have a strong foundation for what comes next. Actually, the step-by-step process to building better habits or breaking bad habits. The concepts apply widely, no matter what your goal is, whether it's financial, physical, relational, any other kind of goal that you have. These concepts are meant to be fundamental, unchanging, and widely applicable. Um, each chapter in the book begins with a case study or an example of the concepts that will be discussed in action, and ends with a summary. So it really is like the author intended to be less of a scientific research paper and more of an operations manual. It's very accessible as it's meant to be. And we all felt that the podcast wouldn't be complete without sharing the story that the book opens with, which illustrates our first, the first big picture principle that we wanted to talk about, which is small changes lead to large outcomes. Changes that seem small and unimportant at first will compound into remarkable results if you stick with them.
So I'll take over from here because I promised we were going to talk about cycling. And that's the story that Tara and Shell were alluding to. And essentially what happens, it's this really transformative story of the 2003 British cycling team. And for years, the British cyclists had been underperforming. They had won just a single gold medal for cycling in 100 years, and they'd never won the Tour de France. It was kind of an embarrassment for like the country and the team, honestly. And what happened was they hit a turning point where they hired a new coach named Dale Brailsford. I really hope that I'm pronouncing his name correctly. But they hired him as the new performance director, which I think is a coach. But basically, he introduced this concept of what he called the aggregation of marginal gains, essentially focusing on small 1% improvements in the various aspects of cycling. So things that a lot of people would overlook, like optimizing the bike seats, using indoor racing suits outdoors, even controlling how good of a night's sleep the cyclists would get by having them bring like their own pillows and bedding to the hotels to make sure that they are getting the highest level of sleep possible. So all of these small incremental changes that by themselves would lead most people to roll their eyes about like, yeah, cool, you're going to like, this is how we're going to finally get a winning cycling team bringing their own pillows and beddings. Awesome. But it really led to this remarkable turnaround where all of a sudden after 100 years, the British cycling team is dominating, where they absolutely smashed the 2008, the 2012 Olympics. They won numerous gold medals. They got their first Tour de France victory in 2012. And that winning streak really just continued on in subsequent years. So it's a really cool, compelling story to just illustrate how consistent, that's keyword consistent, but really small improvements can lead to extraordinary results over time.
I love it. And it's one of those where I think about it too is, and we've often joked about it too, is just starting with one push-up or floss one tooth. You know, it's so many of these things that do sound very almost ridiculous at the beginning, but just doing that action, you've taken the first step, literally.
And that's something that James Clear says in his book, where he describes good habits like compound interest, is what he says, where they make a little bit of a difference on a daily basis, but the impact over years can be enormous.
Right. And it makes it approachable as well. I mean, I think all of us can be 1% better at, one thing or another. So again, it makes it really approachable as well.
Yeah. But it's hard. I don't coach nearly as much as Chandra and Shell do. So I would love to hear like examples from them that they've really seen within their coaching. But I do know from my years of coaching and just from personal experience, for whatever reason, it feels so much easier to come off super strong than to make small changes. It's like it feels way easier being like, I might drink like 6 Diet Cokes a day, but like I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna go to
Yep.
nothing. And that's how most New Year's resolutions start, right? Of like people being
Absolutely.
like, I'm gonna stop swearing, I'm gonna not eat chocolate, I'm gonna not eat sugar, I'm gonna exercise every single day. And then, and it goes fine until it doesn't. And then as soon as you, I don't like the word fail, but like as soon as you like mess up or it doesn't work, then you stop. And it just doesn't, it's not servicing you anymore. You like, it's kind of like this mental shift of being like, oh, well,
Yep. I failed.
I had that soda again. So like I might as well just start drinking again. Whereas if you have the mentality of by the end of the year, I want to not be drinking soda.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to get there? Well, it's through like really small things. Maybe instead of like 48-ounce sodas, I'm going down to like 632s, or I'm going down to like 5, or I'm drinking water in between. But like it's like those small little things that are going to get you there over time.
One of the most powerful examples I thought he shared was this concept of breakthrough moments, where he talked about like an ice cube, where if you have an ice cube and it is, 24 degrees in the room, and you heat it up to 25 degrees and then 26 degrees and 27 degrees, you're not going to see any difference in that ice. It's still going to be ice, right? Until as you continue to heat up the room, once you hit that magical number of 32 degrees, all of a sudden the ice will begin to melt. And he used that example too with bamboo, where he says, bamboo it takes years and years for it to lay this ground structure, root system, and then all of a sudden in like 6 months, all bamboo will just explode, and you'll just see tons of results all of the time. And that's what it was making me think of, Jenny, as you were talking about all of these small changes, is sometimes they can feel so insignificant, and it feels like it isn't making a difference, and you're not seeing any progress like you want to be seeing, until all of a sudden you are, right? All of a sudden you, and sometimes it takes a minute to look back at where you've come. And I see that with people that I coach all the time, where, they come to our meetings and they say, I just don't feel like I'm any different, or I'm working so hard and I'm not noticing any changes. And then I remind them, right? I remind them, hey, you know what? 8 months ago, you weren't able to run for 2 minutes at a time, right? You were working on, had this goal to try to run a mile, and you couldn't even run 2 minutes at a time. And look at you now, you're running 3 miles 3 times a week, right? And it's you just don't, sometimes those changes are so small that they feel insignificant, until you take a minute to look back at how far you've come.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that really emphasizes kind of 2 points in my mind. Of one, and I might be projecting my own issues on there, but like for people who struggle with perfectionism, being like, I can't start unless I know I'm going to succeed with it, of having that mindset shift, like Shell was explaining at the beginning, of being like, I'm just practicing. Like I'm practicing doing this. I'm just like, I get to start, I get to try it, I get to like do a little piece of this thing. And I just get to keep on practicing, and it doesn't work. Like it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. If it's not perfect, if it doesn't work out, then what did I learn from that? Like I still get good data from things not working out. I get to learn from something, and I get to adjust, and I get to try again.
Yeah. And I love what Chandra said too. A lot of the time we don't allow ourselves to just stop and think about the success that we have. I mean, we get so caught up in life and doing the things, and maybe even doing those small actions, but very rarely do we stop and look back and go, oh, wow, look at how far I have come. So again, the joy of having a health coach who can remind you to do that.
that comes up so often. So many times people that we talk to feel like they haven't accomplished anything significant over the month, but then as they're able to reflect on what they actually, what the month was like for them, just hearing themselves go through and, talk about what they're balancing day to day. A lot of times that's the reward. And then they leave the conversation feeling like, wow, I am on my way. Um, there was something, and I can't remember exactly what was said, but I think just with what both Chandra and Jenny talked about, it just kind of, it made me think about trusting the process. Like with the British cycling team, for example, they hired this new coach. They hired him in 2003, and it took about 5 years before they really saw the fruition of his program.
Mhm.
And just kind of knowing about how impatient a lot of sports programs are, a coach can be fired after a bad season. So I love that they gave him 5 years to let the aggregation of marginal gains actually come to fruition and to see the results of those. And when you think about, they were breaking a history of 100 years of
Mhm.
of mediocrity, I think is what James Clear calls it. 5 years is such a small investment when you think about what they were overcoming and then what they became capable of after that. But for some people, I think and this is the mindset shift that we're hoping for, right? Is you hear 5 years and you feel like, I don't have time for that. So I think that's the encouragement of the book, is that you actually do have time for it.
Mhm.
Because what if by the end of this year, you're 37% better?
Mhm.
What if you're 7% better?
Yeah, yeah.
Is isn't is so the idea is the trajectory, and then I think trusting the process.
Mhm.
And
I love
Jill, I love that you use that word trajectory too, because that was a huge takeaway for me that that James Clear put in his book. Is he said you should be far more concerned about your current trajectory than with your current results.
Mhm.
So where are you going, right? Where are you hoping to end up? Where do you envision yourself in the future? Don't stress so much about not being perfect today, but working on those small changes all the time that are that over the years will get you to where you want to go.
Yep.
Yeah. And Shell, I think that translates perfectly into
Mhm.
our next point of what you were talking about with trajectory, because so often our next point being James Clear emphasizes creating systems rather than goals. Know that goals is kind of a big word. Some people have a great relationship with the word goals. Some people they like hate that word. But the idea of creating systems instead of goals, because like Shell was explaining, of when we are setting goals, it sets us up for what James Clear calls a yo-yo effect, essentially, where people like set their eye on a target and then oftentimes they achieve that target. But then once they hit it, they just revert back to old habits afterwards. Whereas, so like goals can be great for setting a direction, but they don't create lasting change by themselves. Whereas systems are about the processes and the daily practices that lead to those outcomes.
Yep. I think the process is huge. I think a lot of the times one of my favorite Peloton instructors always said it's a process, not perfection. So again, it's just those daily actions to, in my mind, I create rituals, that is part of that process.
Yeah, rituals are huge. And I think it's such an interesting differentiator, because this is another thing that James Clear mentions in his books, in his book. But he says something to the effect of winners and losers often have the same goals.
Mhm.
Like, so what's the difference? Because they were both targeting the exact same thing. So what's the difference between the person who won and the person who lost? Um, and it's almost always the system that was created behind it, like behind the achievement, because it's the system that like guides the actions that are necessary for improvement. And when you're focused on the process and refining the process,
Mhm.
it can make you experience like continuous progress instead of being like solely dependent on the outcome. Like I am only going to be happy when I have lost 20 pounds, rather than being being like, great, like I'm drinking a lot more water now. I have more energy now. I feel better now. I have more mental clarity now. I'm a more active person now. I am more engaged with my kids now. I can pick up any activity that I want to do and like and participated in it now. And so being able to like make that continual progress without being like, I'm only going to be happy if I do this.
Yeah, we run into that quite a bit as we are working with people to set goals for what they want. Losing weight is a common one. A lot of people are hoping to lose weight. And that is something we discuss when we do a health plan, right? Is they'll say, well, I want to lose 15 pounds or whatever it is. And I say that is great. That's a great goal, but that's not what we're going to put as your tracking goal, right? We need to figure out how we're going to accomplish that, or how does that look for you? Like, don't focus on the end goal. You know, we can keep that in the back of our mind, but what are the things that you feel are going to help move you toward that goal? And let's focus on those. And I especially love, as James Clear talks about systems versus goals, he makes the point that you know, sometimes we pin a lot of our happiness on achieving our goals, so losing those 15 pounds or whatever it is. But if we shift that focus to focusing on our systems, then you can be happy and satisfied and fulfilled anytime that your system is running. So if you're doing those things that are helping you to lose the weight that you want to lose, right? You're doing your exercise, you're eating your vegetables, you're whatever you've decided is going to help you, then you can feel success every day. Like, I'm doing the things that I want to achieve my healthy lifestyle every day, even if the scale is, you know, the scale is fickle anyway. So even if the scale isn't where what you want it to be, you can still feel good about your efforts if you focus on your systems rather than only on your goals.
I think it's so good to note that one of those things you have control over and one of those you don't. Like, you have control over your behavior, you have control over your rituals, you can control your systems that you set up. You can't control the outcome that you get from it. Like, you can do everything quote unquote right. Being like, oh, I'm drinking my water, I'm exercising, I'm eating my vegetables, da, 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 da. I still haven't lost 15 pounds. Okay. Like, we don't get to control the impact gravity has on us, like, which is all that weight is. But we can control our systems and behaviors. And I think there's something that James Clear says about that, of like falling in love with the process rather than the product. And that's like where transformation really comes, of when you're like just focused on your behaviors, on your systems, on your rituals, rather than, like Chandra was saying, of like, I'm only going to be happy once I get X. And oftentimes when you get, even if you get X, it like doesn't,
Not enough. Not enough.
It sounds like there's always more.
Yeah, the other example he used that I really loved that illustrates this is about keeping your room clean. And you know, the end goal being to have a clean room. The system would be whatever you do to keep your room clean. And so in this way, I feel like you can get whatever systems that you've set up, right? Maybe you teach yourself to put your laundry away, right? Or put it in, I'm thinking of my 11-year-olds. I'm thinking about this. I'm like, dirty clothes in the laundry basket, right?
Connect with the parents.
You teach yourself to do that, and you get that dopamine hit anytime that you put your dirty clothes in the laundry, right? You get that dopamine hit anytime that you put your shoes in the closet where they belong, or hang up your coat, or whatever, right? So instead of only being happy that, oh, my room is tidy, it looks great, every day that you're doing those things to keep it tidy, you're happy with that. And what you were saying, Jenny, right? Just happy with the process and that it's running the way it is. And I think we can relate that to so many other aspects, like losing weight or other things in our lives too.
Yep, I fixate a lot on sleep, as many of you know. You know, and it's as simple as, you know, the success in getting in bed at 9 o'clock. You know, am I actually going to get a better night's sleep that night? I don't know, but I'm getting in bed at 9 o'clock. So again, it's something so silly and something so simple, but you're lining the dominoes up for it to be a success.
Right. And like you said, you might not have control over whether you sleep good or not, right? You can't force your body to get the sleep that you want, but you can have control over what time you go to bed or what you do to it's probably part of your rituals to get ready for bed and what temperature you set your room. Those are the things that we want to focus on, what we actually have control over.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chandra, your example, I again feel like you guys are so good at setting us up for our next point, because when you talked about making the bed and creating systems for that, I'm pretty sure that James Clear uses that same example when he talks about our third point, which is creating identity-based habits. And essentially like saying like the process of building a habit is the process of becoming yourself, right? And so if you wanted to be an organized person, start with making your bed in the morning. And just like that one act, like your closet might be a mess, like every drawer in your house might be a junk drawer. You know, you might have like a million tabs open on your computer. But like you can start building a habit of making your bed, which makes you a more organized person. And you get to start identifying yourself as a more organized person. But
you can use that same example with, maybe you need to set the mindset of I am an athlete. But again, it may not be the British cyclist, but I'm an athlete, and again, to have that mental shift, to personify yourself as that will help to encourage those actions to become that.
Yeah, exactly. I think in line with what James Clear was saying is like when you focus on who you want to become instead of what you want to achieve, and that is a great place for developing really sustainable, lasting change. Like instead of just saying something like, I want to read more, framing it as like, oh, I'm a reader. And even if you're reading 5 minutes a week, like you are a reader. You are like, this is part of your identity. It's part of who you are. Doesn't matter that you're not reading like a book a week or whatever you think in your head constitutes as a reader. And so when you can have that focus on who you want to become, like you were saying, it's like a process of becoming yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you're creating habits, you are building who you are.
I have a great example of someone who I coach who actually has utilized this, and I don't know that we've used that language of identifying yourself, but he this past year he was diagnosed with diabetes, something that runs in his family. And he decided he really wanted to make some lifestyle changes to kind of get a handle on this diagnosis. And he had never been much of an athlete, an exerciser. That just wasn't really who he was. And in light of this new diagnosis, he decided that's what he wanted to be. And so him and his girlfriend as well, they started hiking for like a hobby. He joined a gym. He shared that it was super intimidating for him at first to go into the gym because he felt like he didn't belong. He didn't know what he was doing. But he kept at it, and again, it became part of his identity, right? Where he's like, I wasn't an athlete, I wasn't an exerciser before, but this is who I want to become. And fast forward a year, he's, they've done, like, they had a goal to do this really great hike that they completed. They did, he goes to the gym regularly and he says, oh yeah, I belong. Like, I know what I'm doing. I don't even worry about anybody else. I just have my own thing. He also has joined some leagues, like sports leagues for, I don't know, adult softball, and I forget what else he told me, but all of a sudden he's like a completely different person. And it was all because he recognized that he needed this to be a part of his life, and just kind of changed how he thought of himself, where he's like, I kind of want to reinvent who I am. And he did, and he's doing it. It's really inspiring.
So I think that example is a really strong example of a process laid out in the book about this topic, that the identity-based habits, which is the two-step process for identity-based habits is decide the person that you wish to become and then prove it to yourself with small wins, right? Our brain likes to have evidence. We can fake it, we can try to fake it till we make it, but at some point we feel delusional, right? Our brain doesn't like that. Our brain doesn't like to have a disconnect from even the positive things we want to think about ourselves and what our actions actually say about ourselves. So if we can start to prove it to ourselves with small wins, just I think like the example that Chandra gave, um, this person who wanted to be a person who is active, you know, he he proved that to himself with so many different activities that he started to incorporate into his life, that so much so that a year later he could say, I'm a different person. I chose to reinvent myself, and I did.
Yeah. Because it's consistency. It's like it's consistency that builds identity. Where when you're repeating your actions, over and over again, you're just like solidifying that self-image, that type of person that you want to be over time. And every single time that you do that small action that aligns with who you want to be, or like who you really are inside, it's like putting a vote for that identity, right? Like you're taking like even the smallest step. And we didn't talk about this a ton at the beginning, but just to be super clear, like when we say small, we mean like it can be small.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you want to be, I'm trying to think of like if you want to be someone who journals, like someone and like might think of being like, oh, a small thing might be writing like for 5 minutes every day. You can take it small, like go buy a journal and just
Yeah.
keep it with you.
Yep. Write a
Like,
word, one word on a Post-it note.
yeah, go buy a pen that makes you happy and that
Mhm.
like is like just feels lovely to write with, like write like write 5 minutes once a month
Yep.
until you feel like you can do like 5 minutes once a week, or like 1 minute, 30 seconds. Like go whatever you think of as, oh, this is a small place to start. If it's not going well for you, make it even smaller.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Keep on making it as small as possible until it becomes easy to achieve, because it's those little successes that reinforce that identity that we were just talking about. And it's those little things that you're able to develop real consistency with. If it's too hard and it's too much, then you're just not going to have much success with it.
Yep. And I think, as we talk about it as well, like I said, I don't want to fast forward through the conversation, but again, we're not talking about stopping doing the bad things either. So again, I know you guys are going to circle to that as well, but we can always form great new habits, but at the same time, sometimes we need to break the bad ones. And again, it's a similar process, if I'm understanding correctly, to just do a really small thing to move in that direction, to stop doing the bad things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about this a lot in our part 2, but avoiding identity conflicts, which I think is what you're describing, Tara, is huge, of being like, yeah, I'm a productive person. I am identifying as a productive person, but I have this identity conflict of also being a procrastinator.
Mhm.
Or like I have a task and I am just not doing it and I am putting it off. Um, and so being able to redefine your identity in positive terms and then aligning your habits to support it are super important. So you want to be able to like suss out those identity conflicts that you have, things that are getting in your way from being that person that you want, and start like teasing those out of like, what's going on? What do I need to do to overcome that? And like I said, in part 2, we'll talk about like the real practical nitty-gritty aspects of, okay, that sounds great, but like, what do I actually do?
Mhm.
Well, Jenny, I think that actually is a good segue into our fourth point about just recognizing, as we are starting to want to build new habits, we need to recognize what our current ones are. So as you're talking about trying to suss out some of those like identities, like what am I casting votes for? And are there any conflicting identities here that are kind of butting heads? That's a huge part of behavior change, is just taking an assessment on where you are, right? Where are we beginning? What are we working with?
Mhm.
And a lot of the things that we do we just don't even pay attention. They're mindless habits that we don't even realize because they are habits. And so really taking note of all of those things is going to help us to progress as we're trying to change into more of the identity that we're wanting to become.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like so much of what we do and the choices that we make are just on autopilot. They're
Mhm.
so ingrained in us that we honestly don't even recognize that we're doing them. And so I love your point, Chandra, of being like, we need to have some sort of like assessment or some level of like understanding of where we're starting and we need to get a handle on our current habits before we go about making new ones.
Mhm.
Yeah, which he actually gives a really interesting exercise that you can do if you really want to be concrete about this. Is he asks you to make a list of the things that you do and put either a plus by the action if that is a vote for the habit that you're wanting, or a negative if it's against the habit, or an equal if it's just neutral, like, you know, whatever, it doesn't do anything. So maybe like in Tara's example of trying to be a good sleeper, you're like, I want to get good sleep, this is important to me. You know, what is your nighttime ritual? And you can go through and say, okay, you know, I brush my teeth, and you know, maybe that's a positive habit for you. You know, I change into my pajamas, maybe that's another positive habit. You want to sleep in comfortable clothes or whatever. Am I going to bed at a certain time? And just actually going through your whole routine and writing plus, minus, equal, like what is making a vote for or against whatever habit or identity that I'm aiming to get.
I think along those lines, one of the concepts in the book, and it might have been around the same time as the concept of identity-based habits was introduced. And I know that we're talking about a different section. I promise I'll come full circle on this. But another question you can ask yourself is, what am I optimizing for? And I think that that goes along with getting a handle on our habits. As we become curious about our habits, just knowing that our current habits are going to, by definition, lead us, or default lead us to our current results. That's a principle in the book, right? So what we're doing now, if we keep doing it, we are on track to either get the same results or maybe marginally or slowly head in a different direction. So our outcomes are a lagging indication of our habits, right? So I think that we can ask ourselves as we become more curious and maybe observant of our habits, like, what am I optimizing? What are my current habits optimizing for? And is that what I want to be optimizing for?
I love that. And in line with both of you, with Chandra's activity that she was talking about, and this mentality of what am I optimizing for? I feel like a very normal reaction to someone taking inventory of what they're doing is to want to change everything. Where they're like, oh my goodness, I'm seeing all of these like either proverbial or literal minus signs next to all of these habits. And I really like Tara's example of sleep, so I'll just go with it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to bed late. I'm scrolling on my phone. I don't have comfy jammies. I don't like I'm drinking coffee at 8 p.m. I should probably stop doing that. Like, and so people like they see all of these minus signs and they're like, oh, I'm gonna change it all. I'm changing my temperature. I'm getting new bedding. I'm getting new pajamas. I'm setting an alarm for 9 p.m. I'm like, I've got my white noise machine. I'm stuck quitting coffee. I'm quitting alcohol. I'm quit like all of these different things. And the burnout is so real of when you try to change like everything all at once. And so, and I know that like people like it's hard as a coach when someone's so excited. They're like, I'm good, like I know what I need to do and it's gonna be amazing and I'm gonna do all of it all at once, all the time. And as a coach to be like, love this journey for you. Let's like pull back real quick and pick one thing. Like we're gonna do one thing this time. And we're going to master that thing and we're going to like figure out what we learn about this thing. And then once we've mastered that, then we're going to go on to the next thing. But it's hard. I feel like people get so excited about making changes that the idea of just doing something small doesn't seem as fun or as impactful. And so, especially as we're entering this time of year where goals are on a lot of people's minds, I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to like indoctrinate people almost convince you to just like take a small approach. And that's really what the title of the book was called. A lot of times we think of like atomic as, you know, like an explosion of things, but James Clear was just like, yeah, that's great. Of like an explosion of results. We can have really cool things, but I'm talking about like a subatomic level, like particles that are so tiny that you can't even really see them without like special equipment. And yet when they come together, they're able to form everything in the universe and like in the world that we were able to see. And it's beautiful and it's amazing. And so I'm like, keep on wanting to come back. And I'm like, but make it small. Like just
Yeah.
make it really little and really achievable. And then you can start building on all of those little successes that you see.
Mhm.
And then the last thing that I want to add on from both of your comments of Chandra, your really great example that you gave of the activity to do, and then Shell with your talk of optimization, is that I feel like the other really human thing that people do is that they only see the minus signs and they don't see the plus signs. And so it's so easy to get into this mentality of being like, oh, I have to change everything. Like nothing, everything has to go away. Like everything must go. When in reality, being able to focus on what's already working for you is a really powerful practice of recognizing like, oh, I'm already doing these things really well. I'm really consistent. I've really got this locked down. How can I use these things that I'm already good at to make it easier to do these other things?
Mhm.
And so that would be the other thing that I would encourage of being like, I know that there's a lot of like human reactions that kind of come with taking inventory from yourself. And like, that would just be my encouragement of focusing on what you're doing well. And then when you're wanting to take that next step of flipping some of those minus signs to plus signs, or thinking of how you want to optimize better in your life or choosing what you're optimizing, that you're picking something really small and really achievable that you can start seeing an accumulation of those little wins early on.
I know for me, a lot of the time it's the negative voice in my head as well that's telling me that all the negative signs, all need to be changed to positives, which really is kind of the secret sauce of having health coaches or having someone in your side of the ring to help you out. Just by saying those things out loud, it's really nice to have that support system of someone to be like, no, quiet the voice in your head. This is what we're going to do, and they can push you in the right direction or pull you in the right direction.
Yeah. And affirm that you're already doing a lot. Because I feel like no one's meaner to you than yourself.
Absolutely.
I might be revealing too much of myself. Like no one's meaner to me than myself.
Yes.
In terms
Yep.
of like imposter syndrome, of things that aren't going well, of like you could always be better, you could always do something differently. And being able to connect with a coach that's being like, you're doing awesome. Of like, I think it was Chandra, your example of being like, yeah, do you want me to remind you where you were 8 months ago? Being like, we couldn't run for 2 minutes. Now you're running 3 miles. You're doing amazing. It's okay that you're not running a marathon right now. If that's what you want to do, like we'll get to it. Clearly, we've got like a track record of progress.
Yep. So as we think about our second episode, this is kind of the little secret that we were holding behind on this podcast, is that we are going to continue this discussion, kind of after the New Year's resolution world happens. So we're going to circle back in February as well. So, Jenny, Chandra, Shell, what are kind of your calls to action? What do you want people to think about over the next, we'll say 2 months, before we circle back to the next episode?
I'll start. I know I know exactly what I want to say.
Nah.
But no, I just practice, not perfection. And so when you're thinking of resolutions, and I've been doing this for over a decade. It's been a long
Almost
time.
2.
I realized how old I was in that moment that I was saying that, and I didn't need to go down that road. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I see it all the time where people are like, I'm gonna do this like great big thing right at the beginning, and then as soon as it doesn't work, then like it just stops. And that's why so many resolutions end by March. I think it's like over 90% of resolutions are done by March. And so instead of thinking of it in terms of perfection, I would really encourage people to think of where they want to be this time next year. The kind of person you want to be a year from now, a year from today. So then you are looking back, you can see exactly how far you've come. And you didn't have to start there in January. You have to like pick something really small that is going to help you like climb the proverbial ladder to where you want to be a year from now.
Love it. Chandra, what do you have in mind?
Just as I've been listening to our discussion and as we're considering the new year and all the goals that go along with it, I think the thing that stands out most to me, and maybe this is just a reiteration, but I think thinking about your identity as the person who you want to be in 2025 as you're deciding what those goals are going to be for yourself. A lot of people come with the same goals for the new year, right? I want to lose weight. I want to get back to exercising. I want to save money. We hear a lot of those same things, and those are all really, they're great goals. They really are. But maybe just thinking about them through a different lens this year of like, you know what, forget the scale. Like, who do I want to be as a person? And maybe let that guide your goal setting for 2025. Who do I want to become? Who do I want to be this year? What does that person look like? What sort of things do they do? What kind of habits do they have? And just start there. As you're brainstorming the person you're hoping to invent for yourself in 2025.
Amazing. Shell, what do you think?
I just want to build on what Jenny and Chandra have said and have that really be the call to action is decide who you wish to become and give yourself time, right? I think that's like one of the invitations is the book is give yourself time and trust the process. Chandra already alluded to this. I would just add to make it even more concrete is what she's saying is ask yourself questions. Ask yourself who you want to become, what system is going to get you there, and start there. So you kind of are going to work your way backwards, which is something that we're not used to doing, right? That's like the mindset shift that we've been trying to talk about today is decide the person you wish to become, figure out what kind of habits that person would have, and then go from there. I think you can also, if talking about habits and kind of like Jenny's plus and Chandra's plus and minus signs, the discussion that was had there, get curious about your habits and be proud of yourself for the systems that you already have in place that are producing really great outcomes, whether that's that you get your children to school on time or that you're able to make beds every day, or you're saving a little bit of money with each paycheck, whatever that is. Start to get curious about those systems that you already have in place that are leading to outcomes that you're proud of.
Amazing. You guys, thank you so much. And to our listeners, February 26th is the magic day that we will all be back together to talk about this second episode of Atomic Habits. So please circle back then, and bring your thoughts and comments and successes and maybe some losses. We would love to hear from any of you that are kind of on this journey with us to forming Atomic Habits. So Jenny, Chandra, Shell, thank you so much for joining our Orriant Book Club. I'm so excited to continue the conversation in a couple of months.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you. Happy holidays.